In 2015, From Software, a company best known at the time for its dark fantasy dungeon crawler series Kingsfield and the 2011 smash hit action RPG Dark Souls, released a gothic fantasy action RPG unlike any other. Bloodborne's blend of gothic and Lovecraftian horror coupled with its Victorian aesthetics was unlike anything I had ever played. Well, aside from 1997's Nightmare Creatures, which I played on my Nintendo 64 as a kid, but was too scared to finish. Regardless, Bloodborne was different. From the beast-riddled streets of Yharnam to the darkest horrors of the Healing Church, it is, to me, one of the greatest games ever made, and has remained one of my favorites these past 10 years. Therefore, when I discovered that in December 2023, someone released a mod that was heavily inspired by Bloodborne for one of my other favorite games, Mountain Blade Warband, I was intrigued. When I learned it was made by the same developer as the fantastic Elder Scrolls Warband mod I covered on the channel earlier this year, I knew it had to be something special. And it is. World of Vasnar is a dark fantasy total conversion mod featuring a world of clerics, knights, witch hunters, vampires, necromancers, werewolves, and so much more. I don't say this lightly, but this is truly an incredible mod. One which wears not only its Bloodborne influence on its sleeve, but also its influence from games like Gloomwood, Innistrad, and Greedfall. Though the mod is still very much in work, it's only been out for less than 2 years, there's a lot to see. This video, featuring a preview build given graciously to me by the developer, won't cover the full breadth of what is possible within its confines, but I am confident that my journey within will be more than enough to encourage you to give it a try. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Brother Matei, a former monk and son of a vampire hunter whose father was slain in a catacomb far from home, who seeks revenge against the evils of the world for what it took from him. Like all Warband adventures, ours begins at the character creation screen, where players have the option to play as a human from one of the many realms, or a vampire from one of the various clans. For Matei, I chose a human hailing from the foggy valleys of Stygia, a land fairly recently liberated of vampiric rule. The rest of Matei's backstory you know, but on the stats screen you will notice 2 new skills, magic power and firearms proficiency. While Matei will not end up using firearms, I do dabble quite a bit in magic, particularly with summoning, which is very useful in dungeons, and we'll discuss magic more as it comes up. After solidifying our look and selecting where we want to begin our journey, the world is ours to explore. Something I really like about this mod author's projects is you can really lean into the RPG adventurer feeling of Warband, while also barely fighting in any of the non-quest related battles or the troubles of the wider world if you don't want to. But all adventures must begin somewhere, and we are far too weak to accomplish much of anything, which I quickly learned after briefly attempting the Gaia Reach Sanitarium dungeon, where evil experiments shuffle through the halls. For now, I recruit a few volunteers from the town of Harist and head over to the Vampiric Hunter Lodge, one of the various minor locations on the map where you can recruit special troops, engage in bounties, and ask about their lore. Sometimes you can buy spells or other special items, but it's dependent on the location you're at, with some spells being locked behind completing a dungeon. The vampire hunters have been here for a long time, and were one of the groups that aided Stygia in pushing out the vampires in the first place. Our first bounty on their behalf is for a man named Pechnek the Tall, who has allegedly become a werewolf. Unlike base Warband, bounty quests here will not cost opinion with whatever village the suspect happens to be in, because upon arrival in Bad Elster, it seems the reports are, well, they're true, and with the beast dispatched, we are 500 gold richer. Bounties are a great way of collecting some much needed early game currency. By the mid to late game, you'll have so much money from quests and dungeons that you won't really need to do them, but for now, it's good earnings and plays into Matei's desire to rid the world of evil. I do a few of these, making sure to recruit special vampire hunter units as well as more volunteers from around Stygia to bolster our forces. After doing about 4 or 5 bounties, I decided to visit the city of Silburn's Inn to check out what sort of NPCs I could potentially recruit. In a world as dark as Vasnar, it's nice to have allies at your back, and few are more capable and more understanding of Matei's quest than Evelyn Sylbanest, a former crusader turned vampire hunter whose brother was taken from their village by vampires. With a common enemy, I offer her a chance to hunt all sorts of denizens of the night, which she graciously accepts and at no cost to our party, which is great. It is here I also meet our second companion, though one I will admit was not nearly as useful, Viterico, an investigator who believes the lands of Vasnar are in peril and that vampires are working in the shadows controlling everything. As an aside, the writing for NPCs and quests is quite good in this mod and portrays a lot of the character in just a few paragraphs really well. From here I decided to participate in some battles to hone my mostly fresh recruits and myself a bit more so I could hopefully take on one of the easier dungeons for the loot and experience. Battles in Vasnar work exactly the same as you'd expect, but with a plethora of new models and designs for enemies and allies alike, some of which you may recognize throughout the video if you've played any of the games I mentioned before. After a few battles, I stop by the inn at Hoffadel where we meet one of my favorite sleeper companions, Warren Stoltz, a police investigator on the hunt for a fugitive who joins us in hopes of tracking him down. He was really useful for me in a lot of the dungeons. But rumors also flow in inns, and Matei learns of something strange going on at the village of Olenbach. Upon my right, and I recommend before we continue saving a lot while you play this mod. Things tend to break, so it's best to be safe so you can reload. Anyway, upon my arrival, we meet Watchman Albertus, who informs us the village is currently under the rule of vampires who live in the castle, and whose recently disappeared priest, Father Noster, called for the Church of Three's Inquisition to intervene on their behalf. The 5 members of this Inquisition currently held up in the village church are led by the brash and militant Inquisitor Ormond Delane, who, alongside his companions, wish to eliminate the vampire threat once and for all. After recruiting us to this end, we learn the bloody mistress, a vampire named Bathrevere, has ruled the village fairly peacefully for quite some time, but only recently has been increasing her blood tax on them to unbearable levels. The Inquisitors, upon investigating the castle, have discovered a tunnel used by a company of Blood Knights for their base, and a perfect place to access its depths. With the plan set to assault this castle and slay the bloody mistress, you are free to chat with the various other NPCs, such as Amelia, who is a recent member of the group, the kind sister Annalise, a former nun, Heinrich, who was a crusader and helped aid in the construction of Stygia, and Reverend Warian, a zealous battle priest, who explains why their group is so small, because apparently Inquisitor Ormond is seen as too extreme for even the Inquisition. Accessing the old tunnels, Matei will come face to face with horrors, bodies strewn about the floor being consumed by large wolf-like beasts, undead warriors, and of course, heavily armored vampiric knights. After reaching the main hall, Lady Barrowvere will demand to know why we have come, and although her guards are powerful, with she herself being a strong practitioner of magic, she is no match for our holy fury and falls to our blades. The party finds Father Noster in a cell shortly after, who rejoices at the death of the mistress, but is admonished by Ormond for not doing more for his people. A bit harsh. Noster suggests the castle must be torn down, but Ormond scoffs and tells him it shall become a new fortress for his Inquisition, and sends the priests away. As for us, we receive 1,500 gold for our efforts, a job well done. I turn to leave, but not before speaking to Amelia, who agrees that something isn't quite right about the castle. But personally, I'm sure nothing's going to come of that. As for Matei, he was about level 7 at this point, and with a few companions in tow, it felt like it was a good point to attempt one of the easier dungeons in the mod, which for the Stygian region is the Outcast Hideaway, a den of vampires rejected by their clans who eke out an existence as they can. On the way to which we receive notice from Ormond asking us to return to their newly sanctified citadel of vigilance for more work. It seems we made quite the positive impression on the older Inquisitor. Good for us. Though I make a good effort of it, the dungeon proves to be still too difficult for myself and Warren, so I opt to return later after gaining 2 more levels fighting the filth within. Instead, I hunt down various rogue parties of vampires along the way to vigilance, and in the main hall, changed from the bloody quarters of the vampiric mistress, we greet our former companions before speaking to Ormond, who tells us the citadel has indeed been cleansed, and his order, the Extricators of Sin, are beginning to grow. Of this order, he gives us their mask and garb and thanks for our part in their newfound gains. But this visit is not solely about pleasantries, as it seems Father Noster was not all he appeared and was confirmed by the villagers to have conducted pagan rites within the village, potentially being a member of a cult. We are to assist in his arrest on behalf of Ormond and his companions. He instructs us to work with Amelia to this end, who, at the village, tells us to listen to the testimonies gathered by Heinrich and Sister Annalise from the villagers to determine what to do with the rogue priest. There's a strange air to Olenbach, and even the villagers comment that the Inquisition's stay is not what they had imagined it would be. Indeed, when speaking to Annalise, we learned her method of extracting information was through torture of the villagers, who confirmed that Father Noster performed a pagan rite for the Harvest Festival. Approaching Heinrich, we find little different, as he has imprisoned and likewise tortured various villagers. When returning to Amelia, she asks us our opinion on the situation, and since Matei is rather zealous when it comes to denizens of evil, he doesn't see anything wrong with the Inquisition's methods, but does consider it may be unlawful to some. Amelia agrees, and informs us she already knows where the priest is, in a small ruin outside of town, and encourages us to do the right thing. Father Noster, when confronted, admits to having performed a version of an old pagan rite in accordance with church doctrine for country parishes who often mix practices of old and new in order to gain more followers within the church. To a reasonable person, this sounds fairly standard, but Matei is unfortunately not reasonable, not yet, and he cuts the rogue priest down for his atrocities, to the disappointment of Amelia and the pleasure of Ormond, who congratulates us and gives us 1,000 gold for our work, saying to expect more from him in the future, as the great work, in his words, is soon to begin. That can't be good. Afterwards, I return to the Outcast Hideaway one more time and finally best it, taking the treasures from within and leaving its halls blood-soaked and emptied. Returning to Hafadel for some much-needed rest in the tavern, I come across a woman named Annegret, busy musing aloud to herself a song of Stygia, apparently. After speaking to her, we learn she is investigating some kind of internal threat, a curse causing people to be docile and stupid for some vampiric purpose, she suspects. She suggests we begin our investigation into this matter at the nearby village of Stethoff, where she believes she has tracked a potential source of this poison. There we meet with the Hamlet Elder, who, after some threatening by Annegret, points us in the direction of an old watchtower where we discover a strange spice, but are likewise set upon by vampires, though at this point Matei is well enough acquainted with their kind's tactics to dispatch them without much trouble. One of them, a vampire named Joanna, clings to life after the altercation and brazenly tells us the spice is a substance called pocolum, a drug that when melted turns people into ghouls essentially, in an effort to enslave humanity and retake Stygia. After dispatching the beast, we return to the Elder, who begs for his life, saying a pale man from Zellertal offered more money than he had ever seen to distribute the spice to people. Onagret informs me it is a village near Vampire Lands where we will be heading next, but not before placing the elder under arrest for high treason, where he will be executed. On the outskirts of Zellertall, we come across a band of drug-addled citizens. The ghoulified villagers, aggressive as they are no match for my trained army of Stygians and vampire hunters. Arnvalden, free of their grasp, thanks us profusely for his rescue, and explains he was captured for refusing to take the spice. Though he doesn't know much more about the drug, he does recall seeing a pale figure riding towards a cave near the vampire-held Crimson Keep. The spice trader's hideout is largely occupied by ghoulified humans, though they are numerous, so it was quite challenging at times, especially this early on. After passing through their main laboratory for concocting the drugs, we meet its creator, Montespun, master of spice, who graciously tells us the rationale behind his plan to infect the populace and usurp it for the vampires. Onagret finds this strange, but Matei knows better. A fight is coming. This section was incredibly difficult because the build of the mod that I had, if Onagret gets knocked out in this fight, even if you manage to defeat the 2 vampiric knights and their lord, the game would crash, because in order for her to speak, she has to be alive, or she did. I'm told this was fixed, but for me it required to reload the dungeon about 7 times before I was finally able to defeat the enemies before she gets knocked out. With our hard-earned victory, Onagret informs me that she's going to blow the cave to ruins, ending the spice threat once and for all. For our part, she gives us 4,000 gold and the fantastic Stygian half-plate, which ended up being my armor of choice for almost my entire run. We are also rewarded with some Stygian reputation, as our efforts were on behalf of the Count specifically, which is cool. Matei, now level 14, was really starting to come into his own in this world, and I thought it might be fun to try a potentially harder challenge. So I headed over to the Vampiric Lands in their Forsaken Manor dungeon, which apparently is one of the hardest dungeons in the mod, and even more shockingly, I managed to complete. I've not talked about the enemies within these dungeons too much, but here at the beginning you can see this woman wielding projectile magic, which can very quickly stunlock you to death. There's a lot of these here, as well as some incredibly high HP gargoyles and various undead knights of considerable ability. You may also notice, for those of you who've played Bloodborne, that the castle bears a striking resemblance to Castle Cainhurst's exterior. I admittedly got very lucky with the final boss type enemy of this dungeon as well, a Night Lord in gilded gold armor, because he got stuck on the other side of a wall in the final hall, and I was able to use my crossbow to whittle him down. Not very climactic, but whatever. The loot from all dungeons really, was pretty spectacular, though I personally didn't have a need for the armor I had found, and I planned on giving it to one of my companions later on. But for now, I needed somewhere to put my hard-earned loot, which you can do at taverns. While trying to return to one, I ran across a very strong demon army, which we battled on the pine-covered slope of Stygia's borders. After dispersing my loot to my various companions, I headed for the tavern of Silburn to acquire a room, which, when you pay 3,000 gold for, allows you to access a room in any city in the game, with a chest where you can store your goods. Once acquired, you can access this room via the special units, locations, and tavern panel on the main city screen. With a host of great victories under our belt, I decided to visit Devilthorn Lodge, as I knew there was a quest chain there that I had attempted a bit earlier in my run but was too weak for at the time. There, a High Cleric Donal asks if we would investigate reports of an ancient knightly order, the Gilded Knights, who have supposedly returned from the dead and are ravaging the countryside. He requests we find the knights, dispatch them, and bring a piece of their armor back for his study. Almost directly outside the lodge, we discover the rumors to be true and come face to face with the undead knights. Cavalry, arguably the best unit in the game, are always a threat in Warband, so it's best to keep your units close together in order to trap and make quick work of them on their horses. Thankfully, I had strong infantry from the Vampire and Devilthorn Lodge, so we hold out with minimal losses. Before leaving the field, we take a piece of the Gilded Knight Commander's armor, as Donal requested. Donal, through the use of holy magic on the object, informs us the knights are being raised by a sort of necromancer, or potentially worse, and that the foul magic is originating from somewhere in the Winterroot Forest. Time, he stresses, is of the essence, for if the entire legion were to rise from the dead instead of just a small warband like we faced, Stygia would be overrun. It's up to Matei once again to save the day. On the southern tip of Winterroot's Lake, we find the Forest Entrance, a foggy dungeon of shambling skeletons at whose apex we find a gathering of apostate mages in the throes of a dark ritual. The battle atop the hill is tough, as we're outnumbered 4-1, but Matei is no slouch and comes away from the encounter relatively unscathed, taking the strange blade of their leader on the way out to Devilthorn Lodge. There, Donal informs us that the mages belong to a cult of demon worshippers called the Skursdag, a name which will come up again in this run, I promise. For our work, Donal awards us 5,000 gold and his holy warhammer. In my opinion, the best weapon in the game, as it restores a small portion of the player's health with each swing. Naturally, I use this skill to my advantage to clear out more dungeons of their undead filth. More loot for me, less corruption for the world, it's a win-win. But all this work for the Inquisition has me hankering for the real thing, plus some time ago we received a summons by them anyway for our efforts in Allenbach, so I head for the lands controlled by the Church of the Three, quite a distance from our native Stygia. Stopping at the main city of Herringast to drop off my loot, I was curious to see if a church-based faction would have a unique castle, and I was not disappointed. The halls of Vicar Gregorius III are indeed spectacular to behold, though the vicar was not in when I arrived, nor does he enter into this tale proper. A little way from Herringast is Esmark, which has a small way shrine nearby where players can acquire holy spells. I decided at this point in my run I wanted to begin my transition to using magic instead of my trusty crossbow for a bit of variety, and having been on the tail end of its onslaught, its power. I grabbed 2 holy bolts, a projectile spell we'll be able to use after our next level up, Holy Warriors, one of the most broken summons in the mod, and some members of the church. From here I decided to report to the Inquisition Keep, figuring it was time for my just reward, only to learn that I was actually summoned for aiding the rogue Inquisitor Ormond, who had not officially been sanctioned by the church in almost a year. Amelia, an informant of the church, reported our hesitation at Ormond's efforts, and therefore the Inquisition is willing to let us right our wrong in aiding Ormond by returning to Vigilance, where Amelia, the Inquisitor, informs us has gone quiet. We are to find her and stop Ormond from causing any more harm to the people. But the village, unfortunately, is beyond saving, engulfed in flames, with the corpses of its people stacked high throughout. This is a moment Matei will remember forever, knowing that the face of zealotry is just another mask of evil. Beneath a black smoke-filled sky, we confront Heinrich, who informs us that the Inquisitor has become something beyond human thanks to their great efforts, ascended to the status of an angel. Though you can persuade the various members of Ormond's group away from him, I think, we never invested into such a skill, and in any case, Matei must atone for the blood he has already spilled. And so we dispatch Heinrich and his goons beneath the vacant stairs of the people we thought we were saving. At the castle, we confront Annalise and Wariam, and in the crypts we find Ormond in his new ascended form, a beast surrounded by corpses, his new grotesque limbs protruding from broken bits of his old armor. He speaks of his ascension, of the slaying of Amelia for her refusal to aid him, and of the rights to come. But this prattle of a mad dog is silenced by Matei, and at the corpse of Amelia, he offers a small prayer before returning to the Inquisition with his report. The Grand Inquisitor informs us that whatever the ritual the man was attempting was in service to the Bloody Mistress, who was undoubtedly trying to rise again thanks to his efforts. The Citadel will be destroyed, and the last members of Ormond's order will be hunted to a man. For our work, we are awarded 10,000 gold, and some influence with the church. Matei, tired from his failures, seeks to drown his sorrows in the Tavern of Kirk, but is interrupted by a man named Herwig the White, who, upon seeing his arms and demeanor, deems he is not like the usual patron of this place. Herwig is the head of a vampire hunting order, and though Matei's pride is wounded, his quest to slay those blood-sucking beasts still burns hot in his heart. And so we accept his task of proving ourselves, traveling to a nearby cave to dispatch a lone outcast vampire, only to discover a vampiric knight in blood-red armor instead. Herwig, when we return, is concerned at this development, but welcomes us into his order, the Radiant Dawn, and asks us to meet at their lodge for more work. Inside, we find Herwig and a woman named Hermangild, a colleague of his who knows more about the red-armored vampiric knights. Herwig informs us that they belong to an order called the Encarmine Purebloods, who, under the watchful eye of their bloodthirsty liege, Count Malachi von Eidelhoff, hunt down humans and rogue vampires alike in a quest to purify the blood of the vampiric world. Through our conversation, we also learn that Hermangild is a bit strange, speaking in ancient tongues and bearing an ancient name to boot, and we are told by Herwig that this is because she is a Dhampir, the spawn of human and vampire coupling. Though in the past Matei would have outright refused to work with such a creature, recent events have shown him that his judgments are perhaps not always correct, and so we agree to assist the two in hunting down Malachi and slaying him. To begin, we are to meet them at a secret encampment near the Fortress of the Blood Gate, a fortress whose name comes from the 10,000 humans of the former empire who marched upon it and were defeated. At the encampment, we are ambushed by Armand of the Purebloods and make battle atop our horse, Holy Warhammer and Magic of the Three at our side. After the battle, Armand, honorable for his kind, offers us congratulations for our victory, and in accordance to ancient customs, agrees to tell Matei the location of his order's stronghold, Montalon Keep. With the name Herwig slays the vampire, our objective clear, the name of which sounds familiar to Hermangild for whatever reason, but the three of us agreed to meet at the keep in a few days' time for the final assault, though this is actually a formality, as you can just do this whenever you want. For my part, I decided to attempt a few more dungeons, one of which belonged to a doll maker, whose strange creatures, part human, part automaton, shuffle the halls of his keep. Inside the chest here, players can find various means of performing dark magics, which are unique to evil characters, allowing you to do things like necromancy or demon summoning. Obviously, Matei is not interested in such things, but I figured it was worth mentioning as there are a significant number of such objects throughout the world. At the keep, we meet Herwig, who has gathered hunters to his cause from throughout the realm, as well as the company of a mercenary named Tali von Getanders, an old friend of his. With the forces assembled and Tali's sappers planting explosives at the main gate, we charge into the fray and assault the battlements of Montalon Keep. Tonight, we hunt a vampire count. The battle is difficult and larger scale than most we have done so far. It is wise to position your troops a bit behind you as they die very easily, and the enemies are a bit too numerous to reasonably take on by yourself. Upon reaching the keep, we come face to face with Malachi, who berates not only us, but oddly Hermangild, specifically for befouling his castle. We then learn that she is his granddaughter, her mother slain by her father after birthing, in his eyes, the abomination who has been our companion. The fight in the hall is brief, and with Malachi slain, his knights disperse, and Vasnar is safe from their persecution. Hermangild, or Hermenegild, I never figured out how to say this, opts to adopt the Van Eidelhoff name in hopes it may become something better in time. Herwig, obviously a bit more than a companion, promises to ensure it at her side. Very cute. For our part, we are given a shield of the Radiant Dawn, an heirloom sword only recently belonging to Malachi, and 8,000 gold. All pretty good for a day's work. From here, Matei wandered the realm a bit, searching for evils in its dark corners, until discovering an isolated chapel dedicated to someone known as the Lady of Silver in the woods. The chapel, helmed by a Father August, is a bit strange. There's something off about it, though Matei can't be sure what. The people there seem to follow the church, but in an unorthodox manner. Matei plays along to infer what they are up to. Argus wants us to free one of his disciples from the Church of the Three for spreading his unique dogma, but it is quite apparent that these individuals are more than they seem, and upon meeting Preacher Vernaldus, Matei takes him into custody to be turned into the Inquisition for questioning. The shirtless Inquisition captain, I don't know why he was shirtless, instructs us to report to Inquisitor Celestine, who wishes to discuss the cult in the woods. Though she doesn't directly tell us to participate, this is assuming a text error, she tells us she will be heading to the chapel personally to eliminate it, and the quest informs us she will be awaiting our aid, so we go there. There we do battle with the cultists, and I take the opportunity to try out the spell/hammer Divine Smite, which is part throwing weapon, part actual weapon, which is very cool, I think, but I prefer my Blessed Warhammer because of that healing buff. With the cultists defeated, Celestine thanks us for our valiant efforts and looks on with a touch of sorrow at the chapel her own father was once a priest of, slain by the same Skursdag cultist we encountered earlier in our run. Though she feels a strange pull from the rubble, she thanks us for our work, and we part ways. On our journey back to the Churchlands, we are intercepted by a courier who informs us that we are to return to the chapel ruins. Perhaps one of Celestine's inquisitors has indeed found something there? But the letter is an ambush, and the former chapel leader Argus, now a walking corpse, vows revenge against us while an inquisitor, Reyna of the Clock Tower, shouts for us to watch out. With her aid and those of my surrounding holy wraiths, we slay Argus for the final time as he shouts a name. Volatria. Reyna informs us that this is the name of a cannibal witch tied to the Skursdag cult. She offers we return to the Inquisition Keep and report to Celestine, so the plot thickens. Celestine, for her part, offers us an out and says that this fight does not have to be ours, but Matei is not one to take an attempted assassination lightly, and so we offer our aid in the hunt for the cult. Celestine informs us that Volatria is a very dangerous witch, having slain many members of the Inquisition already, that it is crucial to find her, as she can inform on the Skursdag cult, who, she tells us, has evidently infiltrated into high-ranking positions within the Church of the Three. Though she cannot currently assist us directly, she offers us the aid of Reyna, who will join our party. Reyna, for her part, has tracked down the witch to an abandoned settlement near the village of Lore, where we will head next. It was at this part where I ran into a not insignificant bug. Technically, my party was already full when Reyna was set to join it, and though she was kind of a member of it for a time, she was not physically there, which would lock me out of future missions. Though the mod developer graciously altered my save to reinsert her in my party, I offer this as a cautionary tale if you wish to attempt the quest for yourself. Anyway, in a narrow ravine outside Lore, we find a large cemetery full of undead and demonic entities. Battling our way through, we reach the witch's lair, which after slaying, we search and find a letter from a bishop in the Church of the Three, a man called Jaren, who seems to be a leader in the Skursdag cult. Rushing back to the Inquisition Keep to inform Celestine, we are met by an acolyte, Ervik, who tells us Celestine is not here and on her own errand, but will arrange a meeting with Celestine near Oldgate, as the Inquisition has been infiltrated by spies of the Church. But the meeting is, of course, a trap, a futile ambush in an effort to eliminate us and stop our investigation. Now, normally after this, you would speak to Reyna, who would tell you more about the quest, but because of my aforementioned issue, she was not in my party at the time, so for now, we're going to pause this climactic quest. In the meantime, I wanted to explore more of the world and remembered the mod developer told me of a faction, the Arcanists, who reside within the secluded Hermitage dungeon. Given that I was now quite proficient in the use of magic, I felt it only appropriate to join a group so named. The Hermitage is one of the longer dungeons in the mod, being made in 3 parts, with the final section being the research hall for the Arcanists themselves. Its halls filled with strange experiments and beings of considerable size and strength. For besting the gauntlet, we are offered by the leader of the faction, a Bishop Yuri, a chance to join them. Bloodborne players may again notice that their equipment bears a striking resemblance to the church choir garb, which Matei will eventually assume for the remainder of his run, following his recruitment to the Secretive Order, as it boosts magical aptitude quite considerably. Yuri instructs us to recover a lost supply of test subjects from a guild of thieves, the caravan for which was ransacked by a group of masked lunatics, according to the dying words of one of the drivers. Chasing down this group, no easy task for my much larger party of 80+ men. We meet a mad preacher who says some nonsense about what lies under the stars. Obviously nothing more than useless prattle, we eliminate his party and capture the madman for questioning before returning to Bishop Yuri, who, although disappointed we are returning largely empty-handed, welcomes us into the Arcanists. After interrogating the prisoner, Yuri tells us the man belonged to the Waking Stars cult, who the Arcanists are well acquainted with, as they often use their members for various experiments. They are said to commune with the stars, and much like the individual we brought to Yuri, are mutated for their glimpse into the great beyond by some supernatural power. For years, Yuri has searched for the source of this power, and thanks to us, we think they know the origin. We are told to go to a secluded fishing hamlet off the coast of Nelia to discover what the villagers are hiding beneath and why the cultists make pilgrimage there. At the village, we meet Yuri and her men, who are gathered and forced to do battle with the villagers and the cult of Waking Stars, who stood little chance against our superior skill and numbers. Those not slain are carted away to be experimented on, and though they attempted to seal the path to the deepest recesses where undoubtedly the secrets of their kind are hidden, Yuri's men have uncovered it, and we are instructed to meet her in the depths. There we come face to face with the corpse of a creature from the beyond, whose immense power radiates from it even after death, or, Yuri supposes, in its slumber. Yuri promises to explore this creature to the utmost of her ability, and that the Arcanists will, though it may take many years, uncover its secrets. She offers to meet us back outside while her men take the corpse back to the research hall for study. But when 24 men enter the chamber to extract the corpse, they find it empty. and though they attempt to torture its whereabouts from some of the remaining villagers, none will say what became of it. And so, a creature of infinite possibility now walks the earth. To what end? We will never know. From here, I reached out to the mod developer to ask which of the dungeons they thought was the most challenging, seeing as I had completed quite a few at this point and wanted to try my hand at it. They pointed me towards Devil's Mouth, which I will only briefly show in this video, for it is easily the hardest and one of the most visually striking in the entire mod, and I think it is best to see its entire contents for yourself, to take on its challenges and earn its rather rich rewards, including the best set of heavy armor in the entire mod for yourself. Likewise, there are a few other quests I completed in this run I have excluded from this video, such as a priest on the hunt for witches, as I do not wish to spoil all of the admittedly wonderful writing in this mod. As for our climactic quest, by now Reyna had been returned to my party by the developer, and upon speaking to her, confirms Ervik was an informant for the Skursdag, obviously, and suggests we may discover Celestine's whereabouts in the private manor of Jaren, not too far from Heaven's Peak. For her part, Reyna does not accompany us, as she is off to seek the aid of an Avalyn von Volric. Her hunch proves to be correct, however, and after battling with the guards and Ervik himself, we free Celestine from her captivity, who, after getting her up to speed on current events, agrees to meet us at Ryder's Lock, Lady Avalyn's fortress, a short distance away. There we assemble for a private meeting and plot an ambush for the treacherous Bishop Jaren, as there would be no way to confront him out in the open without catching the ire of the church thanks to his high position. Under cover of night, with the aid of Lady Avalyn's forces, we catch Jaren's caravan and slay him, only to discover that it was a decoy person sent in his place. We've been foiled yet again, and now have garnered the hatred of the church for our efforts, and such will be hunted down. But Matei, still adamant to find this man, pleads that there must be something they can do to stop him before it's too late, but neither Celestine nor Avalyn can aid us any longer. And so, our journey, it seems, is at an end. That is, until a skeleton named Faravis the Hallowed instructs us to return to the isolated chapel, where in the deeps of its mausoleum we will meet with someone. Entering the mausoleum and breaking the illusory statue, which is very cool by the way, we come face to face with an angel, the Lady of Silver, who tells us of her imprisonment beneath the chapel by the cult of Skursdag. Likewise, she tells us of Jaren, who believed her the reason for the isolated chapel's destruction and whose plans for building a new one she knows all too well. With her freedom, we gain a powerful ally in our upcoming fight and report back to Celestine and inform her on Jaren's position, and together ride to bring a stop to his machinations once and for all. Something of an expert at Warband though I am, and with an army of assembled veterans of powerful capabilities though I have, no 2-on-1 battle is ever easy, and Jaren has assembled quite a force for his plans. Though it takes a couple reloads, and although Matei is knocked out in the final fight, our forces manage to overcome the hellish onslaught of Skursdag's minions. Jaren, completely shocked at his defeat, is confronted by the Lady in Silver, who offers him a chance at redemption, giving him her hand as a means of atonement. But Jaren refuses, and is instead dragged away to the underworld by the minions of Skursdag to be tortured for all eternity. Thus, his plot is at an end, and the Silver Lady is free to return to the heavens at last. Speaking to Celestine one final time, she congratulates us on making such a severe blow against the cult, but warns that such evils are why the Inquisition exists in the first place, and gives us her blade, the final reward on our journey. And that, my friends, is going to be it for me. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you sincerely enjoyed this video. I know that I enjoyed recording it and putting it together, and I hope that you enjoy this mod and exploring its various nooks and crannies. It's really, really well done, and I encourage you, if you would like to reach out to the mod author and offer aid in any way you can. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a hankering to play Bloodborne, and I think I'm going to do just that.